All right. I've known Dave for a few years now. He is half the man he used to be, but twice the genius he ever was. Dave is the founder of TrustedSec, a information offensive security firm, as well as Binary Defense. Prior to starting TrustedSec, he was the CSO for Diebold. He has been on numerous cable channels, CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, probably even Sunday morning cartoons or Saturday morning cartoons as well. He is the author of Social Engineering Toolkit, Fast Track, as well as quite a few other applications, and he is the founder of DerbyCon. While I'm letting him get set up here, guys, he's busy. He is a busy man, and he took time out to come and see us today. So without further ado, Mr. David Kennedy.
Turn these things on. There we go. There we go. 1 second here. Hey, Dave, don't go too far. Wait there 1 second here. There we go. So where's, is Renee here too?
Renee. Ginger.
Can you come here, Renee, real quick? Is she like my wife hates being on stage or in front of any people whatsoever.
I don't know if you know this. Renee, when we were married, she was on radio. She was on TV.
Wow. Okay. So she's, when we were married. This is not a conversation that I want to be involved in here.
No, I said before we were married.
So first, why don't we give a round of applause for Dave and Renee for putting this on. This is awesome. The second is everything that we do is very much community driven, and these two are no exceptions to the rule. So I wanted to give them both black badges to DerbyCon this year. So congratulations, and thanks for everything you guys do to the community as well.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. How's everybody doing today? Good? Awesome, this is great. Well, I stayed up last night for the Cavs game, which we won. Any Golden State Warriors fans here? Boo. Oh, football. There we go. I forgot we're in tech. We can't know about basketball or sports, right? But I flew in this morning, and I actually have to fly out, unfortunately, after my talk. It's my twin's birthday party today, so I'm actually skipping a little bit of that to make it here, and my wife accepted that, which is great. But just a little bit about myself. Yeah, I started TrustedSec in Binary Defense. I was one of the founders of DerbyCon. We're actually working on the second edition of the Metasploit book, so we hopefully will have that done very shortly. So I have a lot of the team at TrustedSec working on it, as well as Chris Gates and Rob Fuller. So we'll be hopefully having a great book coming out here very shortly. But what's been fun is, throughout my career, I started off as working in the Marine Corps and working for the intelligence side of the house. So learning from those experiences and kind of coming through, I got to work on a lot of different things. And it's interesting to get a perspective on how things are kind of changing and the different things that are happening out there. And my talk today is really to talk about understanding more of the offense. And what we commonly run into just going in from an offensive standpoint, that's been my whole career is breaking into things, is that there's a lack of understanding in general around what we do as attackers from a defensive perspective. And so, today's talk is really understanding what we do from an offense and how do you get better on the defensive side. And what I've been focusing on over the past, 6 months to a year has been purely on the defensive side, learning how to better stop people like myself or people like Vis here. Vis is a scary dude. You don't want to mess with him. Or other folks in the industry that are doing a lot of research, but more so the attackers that are going out there and going after organizations. And so for me, I think the most pressing issue that we have today is the inability or lack of understanding around offensive techniques and how attackers actually get into organizations. And so I'll talk a little about that. I'll show some things, and I'll actually be releasing some code today to hopefully get better at detection capabilities as well that I've been working on. Just an update, I released a new version of Unicorn. If anybody's used Unicorn before in the past, I released a new version of that. What's funny about antivirus, right, is that, I got a report on one of the GitHub issues that antivirus was picking up Unicorn. I'm like, oh, that's weird, okay. So I took a look at it, and I happened to have one dang static string that I forgot to replace. And so I changed the string and made it dynamic, and now it gets around all the antivirus again, which is fantastic, right? So they're doing some really good jobs at writing those signatures. So since we have a lack of understanding around what it really means to be offensive, a lot of our views really start to focus on things that are more targeted in nature. You might have heard of terms like vulnerability management or, different types of penetration testing or a specific exploit that comes out or a specific vulnerability. Ransomware is the biggest one that's out there today. What's funny about ransomware is we had someone call us, randomly. It was a really large bank, and I won't go into any details of who it was. But they asked us, like, hey, do you guys focus on, like, business continuity and disaster recovery, and can you embed into our incident response process? I'm like, yeah, we can do that, definitely. We can help you from an IR perspective and come in and all that good stuff. And they're like, well, we don't really need you from an IR side. I'm like, okay, well, how would you leverage us? They're like, well, we want to know if we can pre-buy Bitcoin so that when we get hit with ransomware, we can just pay the ransom and get our stuff back. I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like, it's one of those weird moments where, like, there's, like, dead silence on the call and you don't know how to respond. You put on mute. I'm like, am I being punked? Is Vis on the call right now messing with me or something? I mean, but, you look at where the state of the industry is at, a lot of our focus is very myopic. It's very much focused on little tiny point things that come out, a new zero day that comes out, or a new exploit that comes out, or, hey, we have 20,000 high-risk vulnerabilities. What do we do to actually go and address those 20,000 high-risk vulnerabilities? And so, if you look at that, it's a very big nugget to tackle because we have 30 million different ways to break into an organization, and, and the defense has to be right 100% of the time. And that's always been the argument. The argument is for the blue has to be right 100% of the time. Red has to only be right once, right? Has everybody heard that term before, right? So red, once, blue, 100, right? And that's not manageable, right? I mean, we don't have enough people to dedicate to actually identifying every single threat and every single risk and every single thing that can possibly happen in our environment. And technology moves at a rapid rate, and we have a new, MDM solution getting put up here. We have a new CRM application getting put up over here, and there's a new architecture being designed for our new, business app that's doing this and that, and we have Oracle ERP systems coming in. All of those introduce risk. They're brand new technology. They're new things that we're implementing every day that we don't know everything about, and yet we have to be right 100% of the time. I'll take that and I'll shift it a little bit. There was a little Twitter debate happening, and Jeremiah Grossman, who I respect very much as well as Egypt, Jeremiah said, it's said an adversary just needs to find one vulnerability to win. To do what they need, we just have to find one system the target didn't know they owned. And that's a very resonating statement, okay? Yes, an attacker has to find one system that you forgot about or you didn't know about. At the same time, we're not really doing a good job at securing a lot of our stuff. Does anybody here have the same version of Java deployed across their entire environment? She just giggles, right? There's giggles. No, because Java's the worst thing that's ever happened, right? Even like the automated installer breaks and it blows up everything. And then you say you have one version, you have another, and you can't uninstall it and it breaks everything. And then you have to have it for this app. And if you have Oracle and Java, you're at the worst state you've ever possibly imagined, because you upgrade to a version of Oracle, and that breaks that version of Java, so you got to keep that version of Java and that version of Oracle. But you have a custom app. So you have all these different complexities in your environment, and so you have all these exposures and vulnerabilities. But Egypt said, which I really wholeheartedly agree with, and it actually kind of changed my perspective of things a little bit, which is counterpoint. Once you're on a system, an adversarial role is in reverse. Blue only needs to find one indicator of compromise to catch the red. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. If you have layers of defense in your environment and things that are set up and designed to stop attackers or to at least detect them as they're happening, you have a much better chance and probability of actually stopping a breach as it happens. There's no way that we're going to be able to stop every end user from clicking something. I don't care how awesome your education awareness program is, and you're sending people phishing campaigns from Phish Me every 2 days or every 5 hours, or you're actually going through and sending, online CBTs that they have to click through next, and finish. You're never going to get a 100% rate where people aren't going to actually click on something. It's going to happen, and they're going to expose your environment. What's interesting is if you look at things like the Verizon Data Breach Report, a lot of the analysis around breaches that have occurred, all of them typically happen within a few hours of an attacker focusing their efforts on an organization. It takes hours to break into a company, right? At that point in time, though, from that hour-long period, it takes multiple days or a few days to get access to the data the attackers want access to, and then exfiltrate that data out and then remove their tracks, or put persistence in other places and kind of embed themselves into systems. So you have this small period and this small window where I might not care about Bob's computer being compromised. It sucks. I don't want Bob's computer to be compromised, but it's possible, but I don't want all my business data being put on the internet, right? So you have a small window that you have to be able to detect, and that's why I like the Egypt statement is, yes, while we are offensive and we can break in every single time, we walk in, we smash everything, and we walk out high-fiving each other, we still have the ability to detect the attacks and the patterns that we use by understanding a lot of the offense. So for me, I would say we no longer have the luxury of being 100%. Now, if you had, let's just say you have a 10,000 person organization, It'd be awesome if you had 10,000 security people literally sitting behind someone's desk like, nope, don't click that. No. You don't want to do that, right? We might have a 100% success rate at that point, right? No, you can't install that application. That's going to break everything. I need to go through a security review. So why don't you sit right there? I'm going to sit here and check the application out real quick. It's not feasible, right? Business would not work. And so now what we're seeing from a security perspective is, we were kind of the gatekeepers of the entire industry where we didn't allow anything and we're the draconian firewall people that had all the control in the entire environment. But now we're realizing that we have to be more agile. We have to move very quickly with the business and what that means. And so defense and detection is really becoming one of those things out there. Whereas the red team, we're having a great time. We've been blowing people up for 10, 15, 20 years, and we haven't had anybody stop this yet. Have you ever gone to a pen test, talking like, man, I own this company with this, and I did this, and I did this, and I used Splunk to then own everything, use own detection tools, and then I printed pictures on their desktop and showed them I owned them and everything, and then we high-fived each other, and we had beer and got hammered, and it was all this awesome stuff, right? It's been a celebration for us for like 20 years. DEF CON is one big celebration of how awesome we are on the red team and how awesome we've been doing for the past 20 years. But have we really been doing better on the red team? If we're going in and smashing organizations and blowing them up and destroying them in every single capacity that we've ever been able to do, is that a good thing? Does that mean we're getting better? No. It means that we have egos. It means we have a lot of things that are out there that are, hey, we're better than everybody else, and we're going to keep our techniques mythical and mystical and not show anybody what we're doing so that we can continue to be awesome. It's easier to complain that this industry is broke and that everything is wrong. It takes somebody to actually do some work and to work hard and to fix it. That's the hard part of actually working with people that may not understand the offensive capabilities that are out there. And so I'll talk about that here in just a second. But what's interesting is that the red teams are all about smash and grabs, but that's changing. I think we're all maturing a little bit to say, okay, we need to work with people to understand more of the defensive side of things. Like, hey, if I'm running this tool, how do you detect this in your environment? How do you actually prevent this in your environment? What's actually out there from a research perspective? Hey, they just released silver tickets last year at DEF CON. What does that mean? How can I detect that? What are those techniques and types that we actually go and do? We don't really have that collaboration yet. So how are we getting owned? This is based on our analysis. 82% endpoint compromise, 14% perimeter compromise, and 4% employee error. Usually shared passwords across the board or doing something crazy. But what's interesting about this is, wholeheartedly, endpoints still continue to be our largest point of compromise. 14% is still a very high risk and high probability and likelihood of something actually happening from an external perspective. But if you look at our two highest risk areas in our businesses, overall, endpoint compromise is going to be your highest, right? So highest probability, highest likelihood, and probably most impact your organization because, we all don't have flat networks anymore, right? We all do proper network segmentation, and different business units are segmented off and don't allow proper communications, right? We're all giggling again, like Java. So if our focus is not on this, because there's actually a good study that came out. I actually took the slides out for time's sake, but there's a study that came out from Ernst & Young, and if you're happy to send me an email, I'll send you the study. But what was interesting is that they interviewed all the large businesses' information security teams, and what they said was, what do you spend most of your time on? Or first of all, they said, what's your biggest risk? And end user compromise or sophisticated targeted attacks were one of those other ones, right? They actually looked at what you spent their time on. It was more like firewall maintenance or, fighting fires, meetings, things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that we're not actually proactively looking at these endpoints. So let's look at how endpoint compromises work, and let's do like a little learning lesson around offense and defense. So first off, as an attacker, the first thing I do is I do some research and homework. Then I develop my attack, and then from there I launch my attack. And I'll talk a little about the evolution of what that means and what happens afterwards. But a good story is I was doing an interview for I won't name the news organization, okay? What's also interesting about when you go on news organizations is I was going on, I won't mention their name either, but I was going on a news organization, and I'm comfortable going on TV now. Like when I first started, I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't sleep for like 2 days. I like be in a proper suit and tie. I don't even wear pants anymore. It's a true story. I literally don't wear pants anymore. But when I went on this news organization, it was about talking around like Iranians' capabilities around how they've been stepping up their cyber efforts and all this other stuff, right? And so I go on the news and I'm sitting down in this chair and I'm ready to go. I'm fine. I'm wearing my sweatpants and I got my fake suit on the top of it and everything. And I'm ready, like, hey, okay, you're gonna be ready in 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, cool, ready to go. And they go to the segment, and the whole segment is on Iranian nuclear centrifuges and some treaty of like 1974 or something like that. I'm like, well, when are they going to start bringing in the cyber stuff? Like, oh, we'd like to introduce David Kennedy, nuclear expert on Iranian peace treaty, 1974 or whatever. I'm like, and so something goes through your head at that point in time, right? You either have to completely bullshit, or you just tell them that they made a mistake, and then you run the risk of like, hey, they look bad, and then they don't want to have you on again and everything. So I'm like, all right, I can dig myself out of this somehow. Okay, I know nothing, and I don't. It's funny is I don't watch the news at all. I don't even know what's going on in politics. I don't know anything that's going on in Iran. Nothing, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna dig myself out of this. I'm like, yeah, that treaty, blah blah blah. And I'm stumbling and everything, and I'm sweating. By the way, I never knew you could sweat out of your ears and your nose and the back. I mean, like it was instant too. It was like all of a sudden I was fine and I was sweating. And I'm like, well, but the stuff that it really concerns me is like, the cyber stuff that they're doing and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, yeah, the cyber stuff's okay, but what about that treaty, blah, blah. I'm like, whoo. And so I literally had to BS my way out of that one. And luckily only one person today that I know of has that actual video, and they use it for ransom for me every time. So, but a funny story about this, on the news side and doing your work is, I'll show you a video here in just a second. But what was really cool about this one news that I did is they had a segment where they wanted me to hack their producer, okay? And so, they basically like, hey, I want you to go and hack my producer. His name is this. And all I had was this person's name, and I'll just call him Bob, okay? And so I don't know anything about Bob. I don't know anything about him. I don't know any of his information or anything. But Bob works for a certain news organization, so I started doing some intel gathering on the news organization, and I found that they had, let's just say Chase as their main credit card company, okay? So I knew that they went with Chase. There's a big partnership, post with Chase that they were now partnering with this company as their main source for all these credit cards and everything else. So good news is I knew that they're using Chase as a corporate card. And so I look up and I find Bob's phone number and all this other stuff, and I call Bob. And before I call Bob, I forgot to mention this, I'm looking at his like Twitter feed and Facebook and everything, and he's in Paris doing a shoot. So I know, one, that he's out of country, two, that his corporate card is Chase, and three, that he's in his phone number. So I call Bob up and I say, hey Bob, this is so-and-so from Chase Fraud Services. I just wanted to clarify a couple things that we're seeing. Are you currently traveling internationally, specifically in Paris? And Bob, first of all, what I'm doing here is I'm establishing rapport, right? Like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. You can trust me because I know you're already in Paris and that, this is Chase and you have a card. And what's funny is, Bob's like, oh yeah, I'm traveling in Paris. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay, well, can I go over a couple transactions with you? He's like, and he starts to get a little bit of annoyed. I can hear there's a lot of background noises in a public area. He's probably in the middle of his little shoot and everything. And so I'm like, okay, well, Bob, it's only going to take a few seconds. I just need to confirm these. And I started naming off some really horrible places, like adult stores and like, farm animals and, just like terrible charges, right? Like the stuff that you can never possibly make, dungeons, and it was not good. And like $700 here, $800 here, $1,000 here, a place in Germany. I guess that stuff's cool there or whatever, but, so, and so Bob is like, well, he starts, panic. He's like, oh, no, that's not, none of those are mine. No, that's not right. Like, Bob, don't worry. And at this point, I'm doing, a technique that's kind of putting him off balance, right? So I'm getting him, agitated, but at the same time, he's in a mode where he's really embarrassed, which is an interesting technique. And so what I did from there is I said, okay, Bob, don't worry. What I need you to do is I'm just going to go through these transactions real quick. Tell me which ones are fraudulent. I'll make sure your card's still active, but we'll only allow charges from Paris. Is that okay? Bob's like, yeah, thank you so much. And I can tell, again, he's in a public area. I'm like, all right, Bob, I need you to actually read off the names of the locations that these were bought at and then the amount. And then I can remove these from your card. So he's actually like, yeah, it was dungeon, dungeon.com, and like, okay, Bob, that's fine, that's great. And I was like, oh, can you just do me a favor? I need to verify your full credit card number. He gives me his full credit card number. I'm like, hey, can you verify your full social? He gives me his full social. I'm like, hey, can you give me your daughter or your wife's full social? And he's like, why do you need my daughter's full social? Let me start laughing on the phone and everything. But, it was a good technique around social engineering. But just a little bit of research can go and go after an organization. This next one I'm going to show you was a skit that they did on CNN recently, and I did it in Vegas last year. And what was cool about this is most people, when they go after help desks from a technology perspective, every pen tester or red teamer goes after, like, hey, I need to reset a username and password, or I need to get some sensitive information about something, right? But help desks are great. They're designed to be helpful, right? That's their whole purpose. Now, granted, you get like the crazy, like, mean help desk person that hates people that don't understand technology, right? But in most cases, they're helpful. I know most of you are like, yeah, that's me, right? But in most cases, they try to be helpful. Now, in this case, we tried to do a technique where it didn't require any challenge information. I didn't have to know any pre-existing information about employees. All I wanted to do was get help from the IT help desk person to go to a site to see if I can get access to something, and then from there, see what happens. And obviously I had a malicious website, something that would hack their computer and take control over it. And then from there, what's nice about help desk folks is that they usually have elevated rights, and then I can move to different systems and then compromise and get access to other things. And so I got permission from one of our customers, as long as we didn't use their name, that I could do the social engineering efforts on the IT help desk, so we removed the names from those. But we'll go ahead and play it real quick.
What do you think of when I say the word hacker? Some creepy dude in a basement? Well, that's
I am a creepy dude in the basement, but
what if I told you there's a class of hackers who don't just have social skills? They have more social intelligence than anyone you'll ever
disagree
meet.
with that statement,
David Kennedy is one of them. He's what's
That's
known
embarrassing.
as a
It's
social
embarrassing. It's a little embarrassing. This part's a little embarrassing. I'm not gonna lie.
His craft is to dupe you into doing things and sharing information you probably shouldn't.
Can I just get your credit card number?
Some use it for illegal activity. In David's case, companies pay him to find out if employees are leaving the company vulnerable. He and his team show us how it's done. Step 1. Spoof his number so it looks like he's calling from inside the company, and then call tech support.
Hello, you there? Hello?
Hi, this is Ken. How may I help you?
I was wondering if you can take a look at a website I'm trying to get to. It's for a big customer thing I'm working on for Monday, and I can't seem to get to the website from my computer.
Sure. What's the website? I'll see if I can get to it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the help. I mean, it could be a stupid thing. I'm really stuck with computers, but so it's what's funny about this is when I was doing this, the website that I have them go to is survey-pro.com. I forgot all of our pen testers use it for like social engineering efforts, so I totally burned one of our best like DNS names that we had. So all the guys on our force team were totally pissed at me, but it's okay. It's www.survey, that's survey -pro.com.
Yeah, I got a prompt to open. I just clicked open, and I'm at the site now.
Here's what the IT guy doesn't realize. By clicking that link, he's just given David full access to his computer.
Whoa, okay, that's weird. I just hit it and it works. It seems like it's working fine now. Awesome. Well, I don't know what you did, man, but I really appreciate the help.
Hey, no problem. That was easy.
That was it?
We're on this computer right now.
You were able to take over this guy's computer within, I would say, like under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes, yeah. Under 2 minutes, took over his entire computer, and think of it as not just his computer, but it's pretty much a downfall of the entire company.
And
if you think about that, I mean, you know, obviously one person's computer may not be necessarily valuable to me as an attacker, but the information available on that person's machine typically allows me access into other systems, whether it's local admin accounts or Kerberos tokens or, you know, other methods that attack other systems that may have exposures, or lateral movement stuff that we typically hear of. So in this case, you know, I was able to compromise it very quickly. But that's usually what you can do, obviously, via social engineering, especially if you know how to pick up the phone and call somebody. The same thing with phishing emails. You make something that looks somewhat believable, you know, survey sites, benefits, things that are supposed to be, you know, typically normal things that happen every single day within an organization. As long as it doesn't trigger certain radars, it's pretty easy to get after it. One of my favorite ones that I used is there was a company that was celebrating, and I'll just make up the number of years so you can't figure out which company it is, but it was a manufacturing company that was celebrating, let's say, 50 years of being an American company, you know, manufacturing, all that other stuff. And they're really proud about it. Their whole website was designed, you know, 50 years of American, you know, history and all this other stuff. And you go to their blog posts, and their blog posts were all a specific individual. I'll call him Bob again. And so, you know, Bob posting all these things as their media PR person. And so I sent an email out to Bob, and I said, hey, Bob, you know, and I registered like mediaprnews.com. I'm like, hey, Bob, it's so amazing that you folks are, you know, 50 years in America, especially during the recession and all this other stuff. You know, congratulations on that. We'd like to do a news article, and it'll go to CNN and Fox and all these other ones, right? And Bob's like, oh my gosh, that'd be so awesome. Almost instantly responds as soon as I send the email out, right? And what was interesting about just getting Bob's email is what? What do you get by getting an email back? There's two things. Signatures, my favorites, right? So the actual way that they craft their emails, their fonts, their colors, their confidentiality disclosures, how they actually send and communicate. So one, now I have a direct method of communication that I can now facilitate to one another. That's perfect for me. The second is, what's the second thing? Not email, don't think technical, it's not technical. But you could, not headers. Communication. Direct communication. I now have a collaborative way of communicating with somebody within that organization, right? Now they're communicating, responding back to me. I can kind of use whatever I want to. So I started probing them for a lot of information. You know, what their company values were, what they were celebrating, some things that, were they going to be having like a celebration party at the company, you know, to celebrate this, and they were. And so I sent an email out, and I created a URL that was very similar to theirs. And I sent an email out to about 5 people in the company. 5 people. I only like to target like 1 or 2 usually. 5 is like the maximum number that I will target, because if you send it out to more people, like 50 people or 100 people, you have a higher probability of getting caught. So I usually only send out to like 1 or 2 or 5 people. But I send it out and say, hey, based on our company's 50-year anniversary and everything, we're going to be handing out free iPhones at the company event if you register ahead of time for a free iPhone. And so I knew information. I had the same look and feel of this Bob, this PR person, and I sent this email to 5 people. Now, what's interesting about this is I first grabbed their credentials, usernames and password harvesting, and then from there it popped a HTA attack vector, which I'll show in a second. And then after that, I had access to their computer, right? But I only sent out to 5. At the end of the day, I had 77 shells. Because people are like, hey, did you see this? They're giving out free iPhones. And they forwarded the whole chain and it blew up the whole organization. I just had shells everywhere. So just a little bit of homework and creating something that's believable creates a whole complete unique environment to actually go and attack systems, which is really neat. So for me, users are the battle right now, right? That's definitely where it is, and that's all we think. Now, what's interesting about users is that still the traditional methods of exploitation are still executables. Still to this day, ransomware is still executables, PE file droppers that are going out. I mean, even the first stage, it might be a VB script or a Java attack or an exploit. Those exploits are typically grabbing something and actually downloading and infecting the machine. And they're executable, something that we've been dealing with and battling with since the 80s and 90s. And those are still our main infection methods for compromise. I guess Bash is next. Well, and slowly it's changing to PowerShell. PowerShell injection techniques escape a lot of things right now, which is great. And then I think Bash, which is interesting, they're integrating Bash into Windows, which I thought was the most amazing announcement ever. Yeah. So let me show you an attack vector using an HTA attack. Now, this is something, this is a tool that I've been writing for the past 3.5 years. I'm not trying to show a product or anything like that. I'm not that type of person, but I just want to show you what you can do. And then I'm actually going to show you how you can actually go and detect these specific attacks. So this is a tool that I wrote called Vision. And so what we're going to do is, from an attacker's machine, we're going to launch the Social Engineer Toolkit. It's kind of hard to see, isn't it? Can you guys see everything? Okay. So we're going to launch a set, and we're going to go to the website attack vector, which is number 2, and then we're going to go to the number 8. Now, what's interesting about HTA attack vectors is HTAs attack vectors have been around for ages. If you don't know what those are, it's basically a high-text content application that you can run outside of browsers. And what happens is that you can actually call an HTA file within a web application, and it'll prompt a third-party Microsoft signed binary to go and run. So it says like publisher is signed by Microsoft, which is fantastic, right? Because everybody wants to sign Microsoft. But this is not a new attack. There's actually like this book that Justin Elzy, one of our guys in our team, showed me. It's from like 1999, and it's like a rainbow book. It's like this thick and like that wide. And like on page like 7,422, it's like, man, there's these cool things like HTAs. You can use it for malicious attack vectors, and you can actually exploit machines and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh wow, so I'm using an attack from like 1990s, and it still works today. Fantastic and great. But I've actually moved off of this. I've actually moved to this more so than I do Java applets anymore. I have a higher probability success rate with HTAs than I do with Java applets because it's universal. It works in every browser, and it's fantastic for exploitation. And so now we're going to go to a machine and actually run it. So I just cloned a website. I apparently have to activate Windows too. I run it. And it'll redirect to the malicious. So what's actually interesting is the set attack vector, and this is one of the updates that I pushed 2 weeks ago. When you run the HTA attack vector, it'll actually preload the HTA automatically and then push the victim off to the original site. So if you clone like Google, for example, right? It'll actually load the HTA up. It waits for that to load and pop up on the screen and then redirects them and moves them to the Google site, google.com, independently. And since we're calling a third-party application, it doesn't close it when you're actually redirecting. So when they're actually on the Google website, or you make it a Microsoft website or whatever, they're actually at that website, and you have that little pop-up. So it's a really tough attack to prevent against from a user experience perspective. So on the attacker machine, we get shells, which is what we always want, shells. And then the detection piece, and I'll actually show you, I'm releasing the code for a lot of this, but this is the tool I've been working on. But you can actually see like the HTA attack vectors in set uses PowerShell injection techniques. It never touches disk, except for the actual HTA itself. So it actually executes everything in memory, and there's the actual encoded command in memory. Now looking at detecting this, one of the tools that I'm going to release, it's called Watchdog. And there's a module within Python called Watchdog that allows you to monitor specific file writes, modified creations, accessed, deleted. And what you can do is look for suspicious file types within those environments and then send those logs back. You can make a very minimalistic either PowerShell tool or you can have it run as like a scheduled task, and it goes in and actively runs in the background. And what it'll do is it'll look for specific file types and then report those back to you, like, correlate it back to your SIM or whatnot. And so you can look for things like HTA files or EXEs, and you can look for EXEs that are actually code signed, as an example. So if they're not code signed, hey, I want to take a look at that and grab a binary. There's a great module called PE file, and you can actually disassemble and dissect that executable and send all that data back for you, or just take the whole EXE and take a look at it yourself, or the HTA file, the PowerShell files. So if it sees any files being written to the actual operating system, same thing for like STTs and other ones as attack vectors, it'll actually go and pull those and then send you an alarm. So I'll release all that code later today when I get home tonight. One of my favorites is also honey tokens. I think Ben talked a little about this in his class, but there's two cool things that you can do. I'm a big advocate of giving attackers everything that they possibly need to go after. And so making things look enticing. You might have heard of like honey ports and things like that. Well, those are very basic. But as an attacker, when I compromise an individual machine, I escalate myself to, system usually, right? Or get the local admin hashes off of the box, and then I move to different systems. One of the common techniques that we will often use is extracting clear text passwords in memory, right? Using things like Mimikatz. Everybody heard of that, right? Or Kiwi or whatnot? So when you do that, you're pulling clear text passwords out of memory through a legacy method called wdigest, and it extracts it through LSASS. Now, in honey token cases, there's two specific processes, or two specific APIs that you can use. And Ben actually coded one, and there's also a really good one from Fuzzy Security. And I don't think Fuzzy Security wasn't intended to do this, but it works really well. So does Ben's as well. But what happens is you can call a specific API that spawns a process, okay? And that process is kind of like, has anybody ever used the net-only command within command prompt? So you can spawn a command shell with a username and password, and then from there it spawns that process with that username and password, even though that username and password is not valid. And it actually stores that password in clear text in memory. And so what you can do is you grab one of these PowerShell scripts, and you configure it and run it as a scheduled task in your environment, and it will literally create clear text username and passwords in your environment that an attacker goes after. And what I would recommend is you create a domain admin, and you create a domain with an insanely long password, like 3,000 character password, whatever you want to do, right? Make it the longest password possible, and then create a fake process with that domain admin account, but a different password. And if you ever see a failed login attempt of that account, you know all hell's broken loose in your environment. Because an attacker should only ever have access to that specific token. That's the only thing that you should ever see there before in your life. So that's one really cool method. That's honey tokens, and that's fantastic. Now, there's also something that you can leverage too. So that this is out of Fuzzy Securities. And this is the specific class. It's calling create process with login W. There's actually something you can do with create process with login W API as well. And this is what I'll be releasing today as well. You can actually do a minimized. So it's funny is I was talking to Ben, and Ben's a big .NET guy. I'm not a big .NET guy. And I was like, hey Ben, I'm like, if I were to say, hey, if I'm going to give you a show window flag, like show the window of SW_show maximized, what would show maximized, mean to you? Like show the window maximized, right? No, it means hide the window. Yeah, that's what I was like, what, right? Ben's like, yeah, why didn't you know that? That's kind of lame. I'm like, dude, I spent an hour trying to figure that out, okay? It's messed up, bro. But what you can also do is one other common technique that I'll typically do as an attacker is use something like Invade or Responder. Has everybody heard of that before? Responder is a way of grabbing LLMNR, Local Link Multicast Resolution Protocol, or NBNS, NetBIOS Name Services. Did I get that right? Yeah. And so what that does is it basically your computer, what will happen is let's just say you go to find a file share, you're logging in your computer and it goes to map a drive. What will happen is it'll actually go out and say, hey, I don't know what this host name is. I've never seen it before to map this drive. So let me check my cache. Let me check my local, local host file to see if I have this name. No, not there. Well, not to give burden onto my DNS servers, I'm going to broadcast out the name to my local subnet and say, does anybody know where this host name is for this map drive I need to map? And Responder or Invade, what it'll do is like, yep, I'm right here. This is me. And what Windows will do is automatically just give them credentials. Like, hey, here's your net NTLM v2 hashes of everything, and here you go. You can just have those. They're cool. Same thing for like WPAD. I'll use a WPAD attack and prompt for basic authentication in a lot of cases or NTLM and grab the hashes that way. What this will do, and this is what I'll be releasing, is it actually tries to map a randomized host name, and it sprays it out to the network, and it says, hey, I'm looking for this host name with this username and password hash. Anybody there with this domain? If anybody's on your environment and ever uses that, that's legitimately not good, right? You don't want that hash or that username and password to ever be there in any way, shape, or form. So it's a really good way of snagging people that might be using Responder or Invade or other similar techniques. Another thing that Ben pointed out that I didn't know about is that, so what you're looking for is event log 5625 for failed login attempts. But what's also interesting is that if you're doing the LLMNR stuff, if a machine responds saying, hey, that's me, and you go ahead and connect to me and pass the credentials, nothing in your environment should ever accept those credentials, right? Ever, right? So there's actually an event login type, 5648, which says logged into a remote system with explicit credentials. So if you see that username logging into a remote system with explicit credentials, that means that responders in your environment, that's the IP address you need to be going after from an attacker's perspective. That may already be compromised. So some really cool techniques there. Honeyports are always cool. I'm releasing some code for that randomizes low, mid, and high port ranges. So if a port is not consumed, this works on Windows and Linux. If a port is not consumed, it'll automatically bind to those ports, low, mid, and high. So you can then alert on those and then send them back via syslog or whatever you're using. WMI is also a great method for things. They have what are called intrinsic and extrinsic WMI events. And you can actually query a lot of this information to look for things. A good example of this is when privileged accounts get added, or certain behavioral techniques that you might look for. Like for example, moving from one machine to another. Like WMI is a great method for exploitation. You can pull all those and look for those as they're being used on your network. So I'll be releasing a lot of that as well, too. So all of these things are due to specific attack vectors that we know of, right? But did any of you not know any of that stuff before coming here today? Got a lot of hands raised. That's great. So we have people that are learning things about defense, and the reason that's important is there are terms now out there like purple team or hunt teaming. Have you ever heard the term hunt teaming? Right, going on the hunt looking for things. So it's kind of like taking IR but going more on the offensive or looking for things in your environment that may be indicators of compromise. These terms were derived to give people a way to be able to look for things and to be able to have a better understanding of what's actually happening in your environment. It's all designed to work together more closely. Purple teaming is a concept of red and blue. I was on a great engagement here about a month and a half ago. And what's interesting about it is that the objectives weren't to go in as a red team and smash. And then after the smashing, hand them a report and then walk them through the report so they can build blue team stuff. It was the exact opposite. If you look at traditional pen testing, we have what's called overt and covert pen testing, right? Overt is more, hey, we're going to tell you that we're coming in, and then you guys can see what you did detect, and then let us know, and then we'll write a report that says, hey, you detected this at this stage. Covert is, hey, we have no knowledge whatsoever, and we're going to go in and take everything, and then we might run a Nessa scanner afterwards, and hopefully you can detect us, right? That's covert. Now, what's interesting is that this industry typically can't detect very skilled attackers at a covert perspective. Their programs are so far down here from a detection standpoint that covert's not doing them any good. But then what happens when you hack them from a covert perspective? Everybody's like, oh, I need to go and get like a whole bunch of tools and like APT zero-day stuff when you have like password, username, admin, password to password on an external, Apache Tomcat server, right? Like the last thing you need to be worrying about is APTs, trust me, right? What's interesting enough about that is the last time that I've used an exploit on an actual company, it's probably been about 8 months. 8 months that I've actually had to use an actual exploit. Using default credentials, other things like that are always typically the common method. So I'm more of a overt type of person, but what purple team engagements are supposed to be is literally you are sitting there next to somebody that's working at this company or a company that you work with, and as you're attacking, you're working with them on the defensive side to say, hey, what's actually occurring and what are you seeing and what are you not seeing? Okay, let's figure out a way to use your existing technology that you have to start building some controls around that to be able to identify what's actually happening. That's more working together. What's interesting is I don't care what tool you use. You could be using, FireEye or, Carbon Black or whatever. It doesn't make a difference to me. What's important about that is being able to leverage that technology to get what you need out of it. And let's just say using a SIM, using, Logarithm or ArcSight or Alien Vault or whatever. Well, hey, yeah, it's great. You have this awesome SIM and you spent millions and millions of dollars. Are you monitoring anything as far as event logs on the endpoints? Well, no, that causes too much traffic in our environment. Okay, well, 84% of your risk comes from endpoints and you're losing that entire visibility. We need to get these specific event logs in here so you can see this type of stuff from happening. So it's a way of working to get better visibility into environments and step them up. The example I was going to use about a month and a half ago is that we came out of there with like 74 different, for Carbon Black, I think they call them watch lists. And so we came out with like 74 different watch lists for them to actually go and detect specific attacks, everything from PowerShell injection to lateral movement to pass the hash, all that other stuff that's out there. But they had no idea any of that until they sat with us for a week, and that's all we did. It wasn't about getting DA or exfiltrating data out of the company. It was about working on getting better detection capabilities out there, and that's what purple teams have to be. So my question is, why is there a lack of understanding in this industry? And I think I got that question answered. And before I want to go into that, I want to talk about the history of INFOSEC and why we're where we're at today. to not be able to detect a lot of the capabilities that we do from an offensive perspective. You look at like the 80s and 90s, and everything was very basic. Building blocks, right? We had these things that just came out called firewalls, and everybody's recommendation around firewalls were, hey, this tech stuff is going to be pretty cool and big. You should probably keep your salespeople over here and your IT people over here and do this thing called network segmentation. Revolutionary, right? Like, no, that's too complex. We're just going to keep everybody in the same network, and then we had flat networks created, and now you have businesses built off of flat networks, and now you have all these different rules and all these different exceptions and all this other stuff that happened. And so no one listened. And so what we did is try to slow them down. Like, hey, whoa. You can't do this. That's gonna cause a huge hole, and you can't release this application. I need to do a 6-month review, and then the criticals that I find, you only have, a week to, fix them, and then I'm gonna review for another 6 months, and then you might be able to get your application out like in a year and a half, right? And that's a little bit exaggerated. But it's like we're crying wolf. You can't do this because of a perceived risk that we hadn't proved before. But then PCI comes out. This awesome new revolutionary thing, and hey, our company doesn't even do credit cards, but we need to adhere to PCI. Well, isn't that just for credit cards? No, it's for everything. You need to do PCI everything, right? And so PCI became the word for every company, and the security programs are built off of PCI. And hey, you have to do this because of PCI. You have to do application security because of PCI. I'm not knocking PCI. I'm actually a QSA, which is surprisingly weird, but it's just to talk to people. I don't actually do assessments anymore. But the PCI stuff came out, and everybody's like, hey, this is the word of mouth. You need to do PCI. So again, crying wolf. Then Target happened. Everybody's like, hey, let's not be the next target, right? And then we use that as our main methods, and we scared our CIOs and CEOs because their CEO and CIOs were fired, and everybody on the board was freaking out now, and all this other stuff, right? It still seemed like we were crying wolf because it was like, hey. Then something interesting happened that was really kind of remarkable. You started seeing all of these different breaches happen consecutively over and over again. And people really started to freak out. You're getting new credit cards issued every month. You're getting new breaches that are reported on the news. And we became a little bit desensitized to it, but still, the board of directors was like, hey, what are we doing from a security perspective? Oh, now we have industrial control systems. Now we have all these things. We have IoT and all these words. Cars are being hacked and run off the road. And all of a sudden, the INFOSEC market starts to go crazy. And we're here in INFOSEC from the past 10 years crying wolf, like, hey, what the hell do we do now? Everybody's freaking out, right? Because we have cyber warfare weapons, right? And people that look like this, that are deploying malware and all this other stuff and ransomware, all these things that cause us to freak out. And you get terms like APT and sophistication and hackers everywhere, right? What's interesting about APTs and sophistication and targeted attacks, those are absolute excuses for years of neglect in an organization. Every company that gets breached and blames it on an APT has horrible security practices. It's a direct excuse for doing things poorly. But then something really awesome happened. The board of directors or your CEO says, listen, whatever you need from a funding perspective, you got. You got money, right? You got cash. So what we've been talking about for the past 10 years, and all of a sudden we're like, hey, we got our wish. We got cash, right? We got all this money now, and we got our wish. Now what? What do we do? Well, all this stuff stops APTs and persistent attackers and gets us zero-day protection as next generation. So it hit all my criteria for what I needed. But then you're like, well, I have all this risk, and I got all this stuff that I got to do that I've been talking about for 10 years that I said I was going to do, but I couldn't do because the business sucked. But I got all this stuff, and it's just me as a security person. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'll go and get some people, right? But there's no talent. It's like there's no market to get people because this is a new industry. We got all this cash. It's like, what do I do with that? I have just piles of money that I have to spend or I'm going to lose it, right? We all been in that type of environment. And so all of a sudden the product era is born. And you see all these companies coming out from nothing that had no technology a year ago or 2 years ago, and all of a sudden have revolutionary next generation artificial intelligence, stops hackers in their tracks, right? That's revolutionary, can stop everything that we do today. And they're putting billions and billions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars and all this money right now into marketing, into hiring people, into, this technology is supposed to revolutionize what hackers do. Is anybody here a pen tester? Anybody here on the offensive? Got a few? Has anybody here ever been stopped by a product? Kinda? Very rarely? Okay. Okay, there you go. Yeah, right? Never stopped, right? Sure. It's annoying. For us, technology is more so of a nuisance than it is anything else for us. But if we do things right, it's not really a big deal for us. But this next generation product line is supposed to stop all the hackers, right? It stops 99% of all the hackers out there. Unhackable. So then we saw technology over talent. And so we started purchasing technology in a way to make a stopgap for all of the problems that we've had in the past, all the sins of the past. Let me ask a question. And this is a knock on Palo Altos. I think Palo Altos are great technology. But let's just say you have a network engineer staff of 5 people. And those 5 people have been working at your organization for 5 to 10 years, and all of their knowledge are in Cisco ASAs, right? And you have 5 years or 10 years of like, hey, we have a completely flat network, and we have, all these exception rules for all these business processes, and we're really skilled at ASAs. Now you go and you buy a whole new, Palo Alto infrastructure. And you're like, well, that's really complex over there, so I'm going to use the Cisco import tool and import all my rules from 10 years into the Palo Altos, and now I got next generation detection, right? Right? Is that how it works? No. So you've introduced complexity. You have people that now don't understand Palo Altos and have all their institutional knowledge built off of ASAs. And so all these different types of complexities are happening out there. What's interesting about next generation product lines is that, they're still not proven technology. What's interesting, a lot of them that are coming out right now claim to be full AV replacements. And I never thought I'd be on the stage fighting for AV in any way, shape, or form because I hate them more than anything, right? But they have a lot of other components to them than just AV. And I feel like using that next generation technology, if you just use that as that replacement, you're opening yourself from a ton of risk and exposure that I wouldn't want there in the first place. Now granted, the stuff that they protect against is very commoditized and basic. The stuff that they don't protect against is very vast. The stuff that you get with those type of new next generation product lines are like that. So we're not there from a technology standpoint. What I will say is that 10 years of neglect isn't fixed by a few years of investment. It just doesn't work that way. You don't get to just go, skip and go past go again and collect $200. You actually have to build programs on top of that and then augment that with technology after you have a mature program. The hacking team's a good example. I don't like to rub on breaches or whatever, but if you look at how the attacker hacked the hacking team, they went through the very same traditional methods that we would as pen testers. It was kind of scary. Like one of the standards that I helped create with a number of other great folks in this industry was the penetration testing execution standard. It's like they followed the P-test standard to the exact letter when they went and hacked the hacking team, which was really weird. But it's how we hack. We look at the company we're going after, we profile, we target, we find a vulnerability, we exploit, then we move laterally in the environment, then we get access to systems that we need, sensitive data that we need to. We take that out of the company, we move out, and then, he happened to publish it all online. To me, INFOSEC, to get better, requires something that has to be a blend of red and blue and the understanding of that. More of that longer term working together. I find that my benefit of working with an organization nowadays comes from sitting down with somebody and building it out, not going in and smashing and grabbing and taking everything. That's where we have to move to as an industry. It can't be any more about, hey, PCI dictates that we have to have a quarterly or an annual pen test be performed. It has to be, hey, this year we're going to focus better on better detection, and I'm going to go from 6 months of detection down to 3 months of detection. And next year we're going to get from 3 months of detection down to 5 days of detection. And then that year after that, we're going to go from 5 days to a day. We're going to continue to get better over time because there's no skipping things. There's no stopping and buying something that helps you. You actually have to build the foundations of your environment. To me, complexity is one of the largest issues we face in INFOSEC, period. It's just literally one of the largest things. The more complexity that we introduce into an environment that is already overly complex, the harder it is to manage. It's actually an interesting concept. Microsoft, back in the early 2000s, said that, hey, taking domains and splitting them up into smaller domains and removing the trust and only using like one-way transitive trust or other things was a good security model. They realized very quickly that, hey, if I have 17 domains that I have to manage and maintain, that it's so overly complex that no one knows what the hell is going on and it creates more exposure than not. So they reversed their stance and said, hey, you should really use OUs and things like that to structure around a little bit. Now, granted, that's not the greatest ever, but that's fine, right? It's things that we do to get better and to reduce complexity in our environments. And those are the types of things that we need to be focusing on that. I talked about the technology over talent, but we really have to invest in people. The people are the most important part. Why are your defensive folks just sitting there looking at logs every day? They need to be out there looking for indicators. They need to be out there looking for things, learning offense. Go to a offensive security class and learn how to hack and pen test in a simulated environment. Those are great things to learn and understand how the attacks actually work in environments. What was interesting when I started at Diebold, I came in after the voting machines, by the way, just like to throw that caveat out there. when I went into Diebold, what was interesting is the first thing that I went into is a company that decided to stop patching for 2 years because they didn't want to impact the business. That's a problem, right? Hey, we have all these things we don't want to change because we don't impact the business. So the first thing that I did wasn't focus on vulnerability management. It wasn't focused on monitoring detection. It wasn't focusing on getting a tool in. It was working with the business and the people to change the mindset of what we had to do. And what was really cool is our program went so far ahead and so far advanced in a very short period of time because of the business buy-in. I was buying the IT guys like beer and pizza almost every night because I broke something and then they had to go and fix it. But they were cool with that because I was buying them pizza and beer. You know, our CEO, who I met with on once a month, every month, which is a lot of time for a CEO of a Fortune 1000 company, I met with him once a month and he's like, hey, whatever you do, just make sure we're secure and we don't get owned. That's all I care about. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to break some stuff. He's like, well, how bad are you going to break stuff? I'm like, well, kind of bad, but it'll be okay. And he's like, okay, as long as it's going to be okay. I'm like, okay, cool. I remember one time, so the network guys are my favorite. They're my go-to guys because I'd use them for everything. They were fantastic. The guys I worked with, Mark Kirk and Scott Schaefer at the time. And I go up to them like, hey, I need you to do this. They're like, hey, is it approved through an RFC? I'm like, well, hey, I found an RFC that kind of sounds like it, so can we tack it to that? And he's like, you're going to give me in so much trouble, but yeah, we can do it. I'm like, okay, cool, great. I remember one week we tacked on an RFC that removed all 80 and 443 through our entire company and proxy chained everything out 8080 so that we removed those ports from being allowed outbound from an egress perspective. And it completely broke all of our manufacturing plants for all of our ATMs. Like literally like broke everything, couldn't do anything. I'm like, and so I'm in a meeting and I'm getting yelled at by like 4 people and I'm yelling at them, you know, saying, well, if your stuff didn't suck, then it wouldn't be at this problem, right? And it's the first like real argument that I really had to get into. But it was cool though. The network guys saw that and like, hey, you know, you guys, you have our back, so whatever you ever need, just let us know. And all of a sudden now I have best friends in that company where we can work and do anything. So, you know, it's a matter of working with the business to try to get things to work in a different way. For me, there has to be a balance between security and education, and there has to be a balance with the technical controls that you have in there. If you look at your highest probability of attacks, your user population and your perimeter are your 2 highest probabilities of attacks occurring. Now, people might say insiders. Well, an attacker typically emulates an insider in a lot of cases. As soon as I compromise one machine, using that information to get access to other systems are things that I typically go and do. So, you know, focusing on identifying abnormal patterns in your environment, things like lateral movement. You know, how do you detect lateral movement in your environment from one system becoming compromised to others? Those are very abnormal patterns in your environment. Why is a local admin ever logging into another machine in your environment on the same in your workstation environment? That should never happen, right? So things that you can actually detect. Some mitigations: randomize or disable local admin accounts, both on server and workstations. You should never have local admin accounts if you're in a domain environment. Disable all of your local admin accounts on your member servers and on all of your workstations. Those are things that you may be like, well, hey, what happens if it gets disjointed the domain? What you can do is you can actually reboot them into safe mode, and it re-enables the local admin account on that box itself, so you can actually go and do administration, things like that. So I heavily recommend that. There's a tool that Microsoft has called Laps, which randomizes all the passwords. The problem is it actually stores all the usernames and passwords in clear text in group policy, which is... Anyways, there's an open source tool that one of our guys, Jeff, wrote called Chips. It's funny when you come up with acronyms. We were originally going to call it Chips because one of our guys, Alex, ate like 7 boxes of chips at a Mexican restaurant one time, but then we couldn't come up with a good acronym for chips, so then we changed it to Chips because it sounded piratey, like a pirate. So Chips is a tool that randomizes all the local passwords in your environment and then has one central database that you can build off of LDAP groups and say, hey, if I'm a workstation admin, I can go in there and see all the workstation passwords for each one of the local machines and check them out and all that stuff. It's free, it's open source, all that good stuff. But randomizing those passwords is very important so that, A, if I compromise one system, I don't move to others. Lower use of privilege accounts. Why do you have domain administrators ever logging into member servers? They never, ever, ever need to log into member servers. Domain admin, let me repeat that. Domain admins never need to log into member servers. Why? Only for domain controllers, right? Have your server admins and their separate accounts, but only have domain admin accounts for domain controllers. Reason for that is if I compromise one server, I can usually find some sort of tidbits of information to be able to move from one server to the next, another server to the next, another server to the next, until I find a domain admin that happened to be logged into a member server, and all of a sudden I have their Kerberos token and move over to a domain controller. Don't ever need to have a domain admin on a member server. Remove excessive account usage, minimizing that. Vulnerability management's important, reducing the low-hanging fruit stuff, basic password stuff. I mean, how many times will I go into an organization and find like a JBoss application server or a Tomcat server or a weak SQL password, things that are very trivial that I've been using for like 10 years that I still use today, And what's cool is like I have this folder called stuff, and it's like really cool stuff that I want to use someday, but I can't use it because I always find the easy stuff. So I'm like, all right, hey, I just found a weak SQL password. There goes that stuff folder. I can't use a cool stuff folder to go show sometimes. So I hope someday I can use a stuff folder. I hope we're at a point in maturity in organizations that I can use a stuff folder. Things like stopping basic binaries and file types, PowerShell execution. I don't know if you noticed or not, but within, if you have Enterprise Edition of Microsoft, you have what's called App Locker. App Locker, if you have good permissions around your users, like your users aren't running as local admins, still to this day we still have that. If your users aren't running as local admins, you can actually put a App Locker policy in to go and block execution from the syswas64 directory as well as the normal PowerShell directory, and actually stop any user that's not a local admin to run PowerShell. Does a normal user ever need to run PowerShell ever? No. So you can actually stop PowerShell execution through App Locker. You can do the same thing through software restriction policies if you're not leveraging App Locker. Some basic stuff there. I'm actually a big advocate of application whitelisting. Binaries today still happen to be like 95% of what's out there. If you can stop malicious binaries from hitting, you stop a lot of the code execution that typically happens. What's great about going in environments, they have these multi-million-dollar SIMs that I mentioned before, is that they have no visibility into the endpoints. They're still using traditional AV and stuff like that as their main method. Pull your event logs. There's a lot of information inside of event logs, especially with like the new versions of PowerShell and Windows 10. The logging in that is fantastic. There's so many different event IDs that you can pull that give you so much information around different attacks that are out there. It's absolutely fantastic. My favorite GPO, this one right there totally jacks me up. Totally. Deny access to this computer from the network in specific groups. Remove all of your local admin accounts from being able to access and only give a specific group that's like, hey, workstation, server admins or whatnot. This one right here, if you remove all local admins, it means if I extract the local hash value off of the machine, I can't move and map an admin share or a C share or anything else to get access to it, do things like pass the hash or psexec or WMI calls or things like that because I can't log in remotely from the system. This is one of my favorite group policy settings that totally jacks me up as a pen tester. So finishing up, we all need to be purple. I learned so much from working with people that are on the blue team. Like, hey, I didn't know you can do that in memory. That's pretty sweet. Yeah, I learned that from this forensics class and this one little tidbit of information. Like, that's awesome, dude. Thank you. And I know how to exploit you better. That's great. Thanks. Or like, hey, I just put this wall down. I'm like, oh, I hit it down with a bulldozer and I can do this now, right? I learn better offensively from the defensive folks, and defensive folks up their game based off of what I'm doing offensively. I love going into companies that have a mature program because I have to like tiptoe on eggshells. I'm like, oh, I just cracked an eggshell, son of a, and they're like, oh, no eggshell, okay, cool. And I can move over here a little bit, and they can move a little bit. Those are the great things that we get to do when you see companies that actually start to move up. We all need to understand blue and red. That's the only way we're going to get better. So I talked a little bit about changing the industry, and it's easier to complain than it is to actually go and fix things. There's a good book out there. It's from Adam Graham. He's a professor at professor at Wharton. And he wrote this book, and he did analysis around people that kind of changed technology or people or things. A good example of it is like, Steve Jobs. Granted, he had a lot of failures. What was interesting about Steve Jobs is that while he might have been successful in a lot of the different areas that he was in, and from an Apple perspective, in some cases not, in some cases he was, he got so confident in his abilities to be able to identify good business ventures that he ventured out of his comfort zone, which was like, medical research and stuff like that. And he's like, I will give you, $100 million for this new idea. It's going to be the next revolutionary thing. And the guy that had this medical research thing, like, actually turned him down and said, no thanks, I don't want anything, I'm going to build my own. And there's all these magazines written on how this new medical research was going to be the biggest thing ever. And it ended up being one of the biggest flops and never made any money, completely shut down. And it just showed like different failures about how people are able to go in and change things based off of what they know, and how you can be somebody that goes in and actually changes things in your own industry that and what you are expertise in. I'm a big fan of the book. It's called Originals. But it's a good perspective of how do you actually change a culture, especially in your environment that you're dealing with. I think a lot of us probably work in different environments or work for different companies, if we're consultants, or work with different organizations that may not take security seriously. You have to change that culture. You have to be different in order to make it a better place and really represent that. So heavily recommend that. Anybody have any questions? I promise not to bite anybody's head off. No questions? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.